Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Spinar. I'm with the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. I'm here to talk to you about the Grand Calumet River Area of Concern restoration efforts that are going on. The Grand Calumet River is a 23-mile-long stream in northwest Indiana with a 64-square-mile drainage area, including 4 Indiana communities: East Chicago, Gary, Hammond, and Whiting. It's connected to Lake Michigan via the Indiana Harbor Ship Canal, as well as the Illinois River, and it has a number of globally rare ecosystems with dune and swale, wetlands, forests, savannas, and prairies. Unfortunately, the area was severely impacted from Pre-Clean Water Act wastewater discharges of heavy metals, PCBs, PAHs, oils and greases, and pesticides. That led it to be impaired for all 14 uses of the waterway in that were listed in the 1987 Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, with the entire stream designated as failing to meet multiple Indiana water quality standards and do not eat fish consumption advisories posted for all fish from the water bodies. The goal of the Remedial Action Plan program is to restore the 14 impaired beneficial uses of the waterways, otherwise known as BUIs, and we work with a variety of partners, most notably in our Citizens Advisory for the Remediation of the Environment, or CARE Committee, to do so. The RAP program complements lake-wide programs you might be familiar with, such as the Lake-Wide Action and Management Plans and the Lake Michigan Environmental Principles developed through the Great Lakes Fishery Commission framework. And on the lower right, you could see a map of the AOC highlighted in red with major AOC water bodies shown in the blue. How do we restore the AOCs? Well, there are 3 primary pathways to ultimate AOC delisting. Those are reducing exposure to legacy sediment contaminants, habitat restoration on more than 1,000 acres of state and locally protected lands, and controlling ongoing sources of chemical and biological contaminants. How do we address contaminated sediments? Well, we use a combination of removal and/or isolation to remedy those areas, with the exact remedy dependent on factors including future uses of the waterway, characteristics of the sediment, and the nature of any remaining contamination after removal or dredging efforts occur. Aquatic habitat restoration is typically a part of such projects, including in-stream restoration and restoration of adjacent banks and riverine wetlands. And finally, I think it's important to note that we have robust post-project monitoring and maintenance required for all of these projects. And so on the right, you could see a schematic where there's remaining contaminated sediment located here at the bottom, and then we have an isolation or adsorbent layer that might contain, for example, activated carbon, and then an armoring or bioturbation layer with in-stream habitat features, and then finally a long bank restoration shown at the top. There's been a number of areas at which contaminated sediment remediation work has been conducted in the AOC. This area in yellow represents the dredging of the easternmost 5 miles of the AOC through an enforcement mechanism with a regulated entity. This area in this bluish purple represents the dredging of the authorized federal navigation channel by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And these areas in green represent cost-shared sediment remediation projects conducted through the Great Lakes Legacy Act, which is a non-regulatory sediment remediation program involving EPA and non-federal sponsor partnerships. We've also conducted habitat restoration, most notably at Lake George and Hammond and areas along the Lake George branch of the Indiana Harbor Ship Canal and at Roxana Marsh, as well as developing prescribed burn plans and restoration of more than 900 acres of dune and swale and other habitats. So what's the progress been in a nutshell? Well, we've remediated approximately 4.4 million cubic yards of contaminated sediment within the AOC, along more than 7 miles of the east, almost 7 miles of the east branch, more than 2.5 miles of the west branch of the Grand Calumet River, and a large portion of the Indiana Harbor Ship Canal and Indiana Harbor, which, as I mentioned, was addressed through navigational dredging authorities by the Army Corps of Engineers. We've also restored 84 acres of wetland habitat, including the Roxana Marsh in East Chicago, and conducted habitat restoration of approximately 600 acres at several areas in the AOC, with approximately 300 acres remaining. So I wanted to show a couple pictures of the restoration efforts. This is Roxana Marsh, which was basically an island of invasive Phragmites prior to the restoration. And then this really nice restoration that was conducted around 2012 that involved setting up a really nice fish and migratory bird habitat in East Chicago. Also, this area of the Stateline project, which is located near the Illinois-Indiana border, you could see a pretty aesthetically displeasing area near this culvert area, and then a much more aesthetically pleasing area after the sediment remediation project completed. And so, you know, it doesn't just look better when we do these projects, it also improves the fish community as well, with IBI scores in remediated reaches approaching or exceeding state standards, a return of fish species in addition to carp, such as largemouth bass and bluegill, and a growing evidence that we're seeing recolonization by freshwater mussels and by other aquatic life forms such as tadpoles. And unfortunately, we're continuing to see evidence of contaminated transfer through the food web. However, additional remediation is pending. So next steps, we're committed to completing project actions at the Grand Cal by the end of 2030, with 5 major sediment remediation projects on the docket and several large habitat restoration projects scheduled to be completed by 2025 as well. So I wanted to end with the Jeorse Park glypher project in East Chicago, which East Chicago is currently managing and is responsible for long-term maintenance on. Ecosystem restoration is occurring or has occurred along 4,500 feet of Lake Michigan, including Cobble Mound fish reefs located in the area here shown in blue. In 2018, U.S. Army Corps and USGS conducted electrofishing runs in the area and collected 362 individuals from 9 species near the rock reef. You could see those listed here. Those unfortunately included round goby, which, as you all know, is an invasive species in Lake Michigan. But I think it goes to show that the restoration is having overall a positive impact on the Lake Michigan fishery. And with that, I will take any questions that you may have. Thank you very much for your time.